We're gonna do this thing.
Oh, you have the Gokumai thing.
Yeah, it's fine. With the chili. So, ginger shot to start the recording. It's not too bad. It's a spicy. Yeah, I wonder if this was a mistake. It's burning. It's burning. We'll keep it in for YouTube just to show we're healthy. We're healthy. Drinking ginger.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a nice pace of change from the beer we usually
Wasn't
have on
this
the
Ryan
show.
Reynolds this demo video?
Demo? Oh, yeah. With the chili. With the Reba chili.
Yeah, that was
And
so funny.
Steve-O, that was hilarious.
Yeah.
That was hilarious. I mean, he's doing nothing but flipping billion-dollar companies by now.
No, he's basically taking this brand and attaching. So he's basically what Trump is doing, just in a smarter way,
Yeah, that's true.
right?
Yeah. And he's actually
taking
making
his
money.
name,
Yeah.
attaching it to whatever you think his name can benefit from,
Yeah.
and flipping it. He also kind of bought this soccer club.
Oh, yeah, football club.
Sorry,
Thank
football
you.
club.
Yep. Wrexham.
And they're like in second or third league in the UK or something like this.
Yeah.
He sold a docuseries to FX. He sold multiple sponsorship deals and blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
They take this money, buy more badass players. Boom.
Yeah.
Just got promoted to the next the next kind of league, right? And it's like, yeah, it fucking works.
And I guess if there's one thing he isn't too worried about is CAC.
Wow.
My segues are getting poorer and poorer.
No, it's pure spice.
Yeah, no, I told you, I'm not
Those
sure it was a
starting to
good
sweat.
idea. Yeah. Burning here. Burning sensation. No, so we're going to talk a bit about customer acquisition cost today.
Yep.
And it's not going to be a dry one. It's not going to be a heavy math one. We're going to talk about actually a bit about the problems with CAC on its own as a metric, and basically what you should consider using instead. So I think first off, I listened to an episode of a podcast you were on, not this one, obviously, Betrayed. And you talked about CAC. And one of the things, you got a question around what is the definition really, because this listener had a hard time finding a well-established definition of CAC.
Yep.
So it's like, let's start by just diving into how would you define it? How should we go about it? Just so people actually know what we're talking about.
Yes. So customer acquisition costs. There's, by the way, two main conceptions around this. One, say customer acquisition cost, meaning per customer, which is actually not what this is. Then it would be CAC per customer. Customer acquisition cost in general means the money that you spend in a month, or usually it's measured in a quarter, on customer acquisition. And those costs are usually sales and marketing. If you were to go into your budget or into your profit and loss statement and find the sales line item and the marketing line item, those two combined, that's usually, roughly speaking, your customer acquisition cost.
Yeah.
Now, the sales line and the marketing line in your budget, it's there's some rules around that. It needs to be audited. Needs to be according to US GAAP or Danish GAAP or German Handelsrecht. I forgot. Wow, I should know these
You've
things.
been away from Germany for long.
Yeah. Wow. So they have like very specific rules around it, so you can't screw around with that.
Yeah.
Not so much with CAC.
No.
CAC is kind of a thing that is a bit more flexible. You can define things in, you can define things out. And this is what's creating lots of the confusion in the market. And the reason why people are a little bit loose with this is because it's a metric that a lot of investors are going to be asking you for.
Yeah.
And if you can tweak it a little bit, so the CAC side is the bad side, so you want to take things out of it. If you can tweak it a little bit by defining things away, then it's going to make we're going to get to this, your ratio look better. Right?
Yeah.
And things that you should be considering including, but you don't have to, are things like recruitment costs, especially if you're running like an SDR setup with turnover of basically 80% a year. So that's an average tenure, by the way. It's like 15 to 18 months. Then you need to, the cost of doing business here is to hire those folks to be in their seats. So that should be actually included. You can have a long debate whether or not CS should be in here, if they're running renewals and upsells, upsells specifically. You can have a debate if account management should be in here. I've seen now setups where people put CS and even account management into general and admin.
Yeah.
So basically taking it not into cost of goods sold, which is usually revenue, cost of goods sold. Then you have a gross margin. Then you have a sales and marketing. Then you have your research and development, so product. And then you have general and admin. And they're basically putting it in general and admin, which is like crazy, but can be done. And you have all of that flexibility, but usually speaking, it should be centered around your sales and marketing expenses.
Yeah, I think one of the things you talked about is you can do so much complexity with this metric, but actually trying to keep it simple.
I think that's kind of once we dive into that and kind of see all the different additions to that metric, then it's a one thing. I think one main advice I have on that specific one is if you doctor it too much, it's going to lose a little bit more value for you on the operational side because so many things that are important aren't in there, right? But the other thing is it's going to erode your investor trust, right? If you go out, put big number on your slide deck on, hey, our CAC payback is 10. What I often got, and it's not Growblocks, it was kind of before that, was the question, okay, CAC, fully loaded or not?
Yeah.
Everyone asked that question.
Yeah.
And then you wanna be able to kind of say yes, and not lie too much about it. They all expect that you kind of gave it a haircut here and there and put something not in that maybe could be in. But it's really about if you doctor it too much and you go out with that number and people then drill into that, you don't want to suddenly kind of wake up one morning and be like, actually it's, now we're at 15. So and I think that's generally speaking my advice. Keep it ideally as simple as possible on sales and marketing. And that's it.
So let's get into some of the problems, right? We kind of said it in the beginning that we see some challenges with this metric CAC. What are some of the problems here?
So number one, CAC just by itself is pretty useless. You can't really use that for anything. So what are people doing? They're basically compounding it with something else. Yeah. They're compounding it with maybe a payback period. They're compounding it with LTV. They're compounding it with your gross margin and so forth. Yeah. Trying to take care of all kinds of different challenges that could be around it, right? Yeah. Because as you acquire a new customer, you don't really ask how long is that customer going to stay with me. So that's then the lifetime value of that customer that would then actually kind of play a role. Yeah. If you only look at the acquisition side, then you might be subject to some gaming that happens around it. So very much focusing on segments that are easy to acquire but have a high churn rate. Yeah. So where I've seen that is agencies on the marketing stack. They're usually very flaky, easy to sell to, and also easy to leave again. Yeah. There might be things around, the gross margin adjustment of it. Yeah. So if you have, gross margin matters, it feels like an accounting 101. Yeah, today. Pretty much. But you have your revenue line item. Then you have a cost of goods sold. This is all the cost that you need to spend in order to service that revenue. And then you have gross margin. That's kind of the ratio between those two things. And ideally, your gross margin in SaaS should be around 80-85%. Yeah. So many people are 75 and above, and that's okay. But best in class is 85% these days, which is crazy, but that's what it is. And basically, then people say like, well, if you need that much money in order to service the revenue that you acquire, you kind of need to give the revenue kind of a discount. So let's just say you acquire $1 million in revenue in that year or in that quarter or whatever. You actually need to adjust it by the gross margin. So you need to take a haircut of 15 or 20 or 25%, depending, it's the inverse, 75, 80, 85%. So you really only acquired not 1 million, you only acquired 800,000, and now 800,000 needs to be put into comparison to the money that you spend and so forth, right? So you kind of have that additional challenge in there. And then usually what people, and this is really, smart finance people and those folks, they basically say, okay, cool, figure it out. So what you do, you take CAC payback, you adjust it by gross margin, and you add lifetime value to it, right? So it's basically gross margin adjusted customer acquisition cost over lifetime value.
I feel like we need to, if you're watching this on YouTube, we just need that up in writing, like somewhere. Get to it, Bart.
Yes.
Okay, explain.
So, I mean, basically, it's a little bit of kind of what I just went through, right? So the customer acquisition cost, okay, cool, I know that. That's roughly the sales and marketing. Gross margin adjusted is you need to either give a discount or an addition on top in terms of, the cost that you need to spend in perpetuity to service that revenue. And then you want to put that into relation to not only the value that you've gotten from the initial acquisition, you want to put it into relation to the lifetime value, which then really includes also churn as a metric. Right? Because then you basically say, okay, I acquired 1 million and I know I'm going to churn 10% every year. So then that's going to be, my lifetime value of that whole thing, right? And that ideally should hit around 4 to 5, these days. We'll get into benchmark in a second. But that's what people came up with. So customer acquisition costs, gross margin adjusted over lifetime value, which basically means newly acquired and then divided by your average churn rate. What do you do if you have negative churn? I don't know. I think you're screwed in a good way. But so that's what people came up with, and the reason why people came up with that is because it basically takes all the criticism away. Right? It's like, oh well, you're not this and you're not that. Well, no, it's all in this number. And obviously finance people love having the whole go-to-market summed up in one number that they can track and goes up and down. And they love it because the VCs love it because, oh, wow, I need to know one single number and I can, that's all I need to say no to that, deck here, basically. And then they also like it for another reason because it's all ratioed out. Everything is a ratio in here. I can take that number and say like, oh, my other 20 decks I got, they have a higher number than you have. At this point, I don't even know if higher is better, by the way. I've lost track of that. But, and therefore, no, right? So basically you can stack rank across, a whole portfolio of companies with this one number. So they love that really much. Who doesn't love it are the people that actually need to deliver that number. So the operators.
If you came to me, so we need to improve the CAC gross margin adjusted LTV ratio. Okay. So I guess I'm doing some ads.
So and the reason why it's pretty useless in that sense for operators is if you're the CRO and you own the whole thing, or if you're doing RevOps and you're trying to kind of, okay, what's the problem? Basically, when you see this number trending in the wrong direction, what you would need to do is you would need to go on Slack, go into general, to add here and say, all of you suck. You need to improve.
Why not add channel? Like, sorry.
I know. It's because then so that's what that would be your process of not root cause analysis, but corrective action basically. And obviously it's pretty useless, right? So it doesn't really help you at all.
And you haven't even talked about the fact that LTV, if you're early on, that you won't necessarily know. It's gonna change over. I mean, so we can go on forever. I guess.
So those are kind of the issues with those one bulk number, right? And it's really not helpful. And then obviously, by the way, I didn't mention this here, but what then CFOs do, and this is a little bit of a side note to kind of side jab to our finance folks listening. They basically kind of take this number and then they build the whole model to hit this number to exactly And it's like, oh, I need to churn just a little bit here. It seems a little bit there. We don't need so many people, and conversion rate goes a little bit up. And, I'm at 5x. Wonderful. Now we can sell this company. That's easy. So they're basically kind of treating it like an input, which is actually, should be seen as an output, actually. Anyway, so those are some of the issues with that. So obviously, so we shouldn't use that number. So what should we be using?
Yeah. If you're an operator and you need to operate the business.
Yeah. I can only recommend using CAC payback. Customer acquisition cost, payback time, and leave it at that. Sure, you should be tracking churn or net retention rate on the side. You should be tracking, finance will be tracking gross margin for you. You don't need to worry about this. All of these things, you should kind of break them apart and look them in isolation. But I think the one thing that really is extremely useful is customer acquisition cost and the payback thereof, right? And again, how that works is how long does it take your organization to recoup the money that you have spent to acquire those customers? For those customers then to kind of pay you. Usually this is measured in month, and usually it, in a naive kind of way, assumes that customers are sending you checks monthly for the monthly recurring revenue that they're supposed to pay you. That's obviously not always true. You might have upfront contracts and so forth, right? So that's different.
I think Dave Kellogg talked about this. Well, if you have upfront payment, for an annual, then probably your CAC payback is 1. We can debate if it's 1 or 0, but anyway.
Yes. No, exactly. So, and so again, in a naive way, it basically assumes that it happens monthly. That's obviously not always true. But that is a great productivity measure or efficiency measure, really. You spend $1 million and it takes you 10 months to recoup the $1 million. So that's super straightforward, right? And obviously you can go into, some people add, again, let's make it more complex. Why not? Some people add cash recoup time.
Okay, so
which is basically that means, we closed $1 million in ARR, and we have all upfront contracts, and it takes us on average 60 days to, get the cash in. So we're basically recouping the $1 million within 60 days. So that's pretty, powerful, because obviously this is what then SaaS is trying to optimize for. It's like, so we outlaid the cash here to acquire you, and you're paying all of that stuff back within 2 months. So that means I can take the same cash that I used on you to acquire a new cohort, right? And that obviously makes you cash-wise extremely efficient, right? And very much in opposite to if you have monthly invoices coming in, it will take you almost a year to actually have that money back and then kind of reuse it in order to generate new cash.
I think maybe it was what's it called, Skok or Tom Tunkus talking about you go through a cash trial as a SaaS business, because you do that upfront payment, and then the more customers you add in a given quarter, it's gonna get even redder and redder for that point of time until you recoup the cash.
No, exactly. So this is a kind of good thing to kind of keep in mind. But generally speaking, I think the CAC payback metric is also something that has been, there are lots of interesting stats around it and benchmarks, and we might get into this in a second. But generally speaking, right, what you should be moving away from is like how big is my CAC or whatever that means, because it doesn't actually matter. It matters how long does it take you to recoup that CAC. That's the real thing. If you run a sales and marketing function that is $20 million a year in terms of cost, that doesn't tell you anything whether or not it's better or worse than something that is $100 million or $2 million. There's no difference between those numbers really from an efficiency perspective. The difference comes in once you start talking about, what are they producing and how long does it actually take to kind of recoup that, right? And the idea is if you have CAC, but you actually don't sign up so many customers, it will take you longer and longer and longer to recoup the money, right? So this is then, less efficient. And I think where some of that stuff comes in, like operationally useful, is you want to start and we talked about this before, but you want to start breaking out your different areas in the organization into their own little CAC payback streams. You want to understand in a very simple way efficiency of Europe versus efficiency in the US.
Yeah.
So markets or regions, could be Germany against the UK or whatever. You might also want to understand your efficiencies between outbound and inbound.
Yeah.
Or, sales-led, product-led, and so forth, right? Then, whatever you're using, you want to kind of understand what is working, what is not working. And you might even want to understand them in combination, right? And this is where it gets a little bit complicated. But at the end of the day, you would then want to know, okay, outbound in Germany versus outbound in the UK, what is more efficient?
Yeah.
And this then really is something that I would say is the core point of being data-driven. It's not that, okay, now we know that those numbers are different, but now I basically have a signal that can isolate for me where I need to dig in order to get better, right? So the next step is then, okay, UK outbound isn't working apparently. Why is that, right? And you kind of dig into it, and it might be that you just had a bunch of new reps that are ramping, or it might be that your conversion rate is different, or it might be whatever whatever it might be. You basically kind of, if you're data-driven in the sense, you always want to isolate the problem until you get to, oh, this is probably the real issue.
Yeah.
And then you can start digging into the real world, right? So you go from the top, okay, CAC payback, heat map, if you will. Double click on this red thing. Then, it expands, you understand what's behind that. Yeah. And then you see, oh, it's really the conversion rate that's the problem here. And then you can jump into, okay, why is that? And that then usually brings you potentially outside of the data realm into the real world. I need to have some conversation with people. Why is that? Why is it not working?
I think we saw a pretty good example. I'm not sure if we can share it. So maybe it gets edited out, but that's fine. We ran a QBR for someone, and they basically discovered different efficiencies between two markets, and they realized they were missing some essential features in a market that their competitors had, so their win rates were lower, right? And they could then start calculating the business case on the back of that. And that's, again, if you go deeper and deeper down and then end up with a conversation and actually sit down and talk with a rep who's closing deals. And so why are you not efficient in this market? It's like, well, look at this competitor here. They do these two things, which, is quite essential for this market. Boom.
And this is then in this case is where usually the delta realm stops.
Yeah.
Right? You need to have that conversation in order to figure out that this feature against this competitor and whatever. But really having the ability to have that specific targeted conversation in the first place, that's kind of the key here, right?
Yeah.
And you could obviously argue that all of this is all gone and, recorded and transcribed and, we know everything. Usually isn't like that. It's like, it gets you so far and then go talk to the actual person around it.
So what is a good CAC payback then? We've talked a bit about you can use it for resource allocation and optimization in terms of your priorities. So if you've started establishing CAC payback as one of the core metrics to operate the business, what should you be gunning for?
Yeah, it's a good question. So we're now kind of entering the realm of benchmarking. And we recently saw like a LinkedIn post that got a lot of likes, but also a lot of flack, which was basically, if you're B2B, your CAC payback should be X. If you're B2C, your CAC payback should be Y, right? And the reason why that advice was poor and or useless is, guess what? The real reason, if you plot it out, the real reason why those two things are different is that B2C, you have smaller ticket sizes. So in order to be efficient, you just don't have, that much time to kind of pay that back. And if you're selling higher ticket sizes, then, you can do that differently. So if you plot it out on an ACV range instead, what you're going to be seeing is that if you are in the below 1,000 euro range, what you might be shooting for is 3 to 12 months. It goes up to 12 months, 8 months being the median here. I'm reading this off a chart from our dear friend Ray Reich from RevOps Squared. And it goes up to, above $100,000 on the top end. It's 35-month CAC payback.
Yeah.
The median is 22-month CAC payback. The overall median for the whole set here is 16 months, by the way. And now, question to you, and we can edit this out, of course. Why do we see an increase from CAC payback? You know, this is all a ratio. This all should be, you know, why is there a difference between the ACV levels and the CAC payback that people are comfortable with?
Well, it takes longer to close a higher ticket size.
That has nothing to do with that.
Damn it. Edit it out.
Yeah. So the and this is an hypothesis I discussed it with Ray once, and with Ben Murray actually. The hypothesis is churn. So what we have seen, and pretty consistently so, is that the smaller your tickets are, the higher your churn rate will be.
Yeah.
And if you are selling a ticket for $500,000, your churn rate will be very low.
Yeah.
Which basically then in essence means that the LTV here would probably, and don't want to complicate the picture, but your LTV, if this was all LTV adjusted, you would probably see them being fairly similar. Whatever that number then is, I think it would be 3 to 5 or something like that. But that's probably what you would be seeing. And the reason why then the high ACVs would be coming down and being also very efficient over time is because obviously their churn rate is much lower.
Yeah.
Right. So they yes, it takes 35 months to recoup the money, but those companies will stay with you for 10 years anyway.
Yeah.
So it's fine. And in B2C, for example, an annual churn rate of 50 to 60% is deemed good, right? So that means you have no other choice than to recoup that customer
fast
in 6 months.
Yeah.
Otherwise it's it's done.
Yeah.
And in order for that to turn a profit, you basically then need to say, okay, really I need to recoup it in the first 3 months. So then I kind of have a 2x on this thing on top, right?
Yeah.
And if you kind of now we cut in the small range, now we'd said like two times profit for that customer. And the enterprise, it takes you 3 years to recoup, but they're going to be with you for 10 years. So you're talking 3 years.
Yeah.
Right? It's a 2 to 3 range here, right? And generally speaking, obviously what you want to hit is 4 to 5 in that number. And I guess we need to ask Ray to kind of, figure out what that would look like here. But that fundamentally is probably the reason. Now, another question to you, Mikkel.
Oh boy.
That one we prepped.
Yeah, okay.
That one we prepped.
So we're gonna keep it in.
Yeah,
we're gonna keep it in.
That one we prepped. So let's just say you and your competitor, you have the exact same CAC payback, but your CAC is higher than your competitors. Which company is going to win?
The last one. That's cheating. So my original answer was the first one, right?
Yeah.
Because CAC is lower. That sounds great.
Yeah.
But so why is that actually? Why is it the higher CAC?
Yeah. So if you have the same CAC payback, so let's just say you're both equally efficient.
Yeah. 12 months.
Yes. What it really means, if one party has a higher CAC than the other, what it really means, and that's why it's a bit of a tricky question, what it really means is that one of them has either a higher ACV or much better conversion rates.
Yeah.
There's, one of those two, that's it.
Yeah.
And the reason why that matters is you can basically bid more on all your acquisition channels.
Yep.
Think about it on a very small scale. If you sell a product for $1,000, the money you can spend on Google to acquire that lead can only be, I don't know, $100 or something like that. I don't know the numbers right now, because obviously not every lead is going to close. That means you spend like $300 on an opportunity, and then the opportunity still needs to win, and then you're going to get to 1,000, right? However, if you are selling a product for 10,000 euros, suddenly you can, in the same equation, spend maybe $500 per that lead.
Yeah.
Right. And that gives you a lot more places where you can spend that money, and where you can outbid your competitor. Right. And in some cases, you can basically make it prohibitive for that competitor to even enter that marketplace.
Yeah.
Right. So basically, on Google, it's like you always outbid. You're always second or third or fourth rank.
Yeah. Yeah.
And who's then going to win? Well, the one that basically can afford the higher CAC because of a higher ACV, better conversion rates, or whatever it might be. That's the reason.
Yeah. It speaks kind of to the unit economics, right? You can run certain motions, even outbound might be in play depending on ticket sizes and all that stuff, where a competitor can't. So it limits them even.
Yep.
Okay. So CAC payback is really the way to go.
Solved,
easy.
Next.
Next metric.
If someone but this could be a good one. If someone has a question or a metric that they want to have explained or deep dived into, they can send an email to
podcast
at
roblox.com.
And you can also send praise there. You can say, for example, Mikkel, you look very beautiful.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, totally. And I mean, the only cost or thing we ask in return is, number one, great question. Number two, please give it a review.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Please give us a review.
Now we're not going to get any emails to the podcast.
No, they're just going to review us.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, that's right. Wonderful.
Thank you so much, Tony. And
thanks
Mikkel. For listening.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.